see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
What unites people? Armies, gold, flags, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it.
If you want to stand out from everybody else, you need to get into storytelling.
Draw a different frame around the same set of circumstances and new pathways come into view.
Welcome to ARTEFACTLive with me, Scot MacArthur, where we look at the art and science of story. We don't care who you are, whether you're a bricklayer, a professor or a speaker, all we care about is you being a good storyteller.
Thank God the drummers arrived.
It's time to realise that facts tell, but it's stories that sell.
Get me some nasty and get it now or someone's getting shot.
And that's a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche of a 1,000 comments.
Selling a hemorrhoid cream to someone who's got hemorrhoids.
Got a whip.
I was born into a deep contradiction.
This stuff's magic.
God, that's so clever.
Hello, fellow storytellers, and welcome to ARTEFACTLive with me, Scot MacArthur, where we look at the art and science of storytelling. Just wanted to start by saying a big thank you to everybody who's already signed up for my Patreon and coffee sites. It's brilliant to have you there, and I'm developing that all the time, and I've decided to change my strategy a little bit over there, and I'm going to be using it for a lot of my long form videos, because at the moment long form isn't the done thing on the social platforms, so I think there's still an appetite for it, so that's where I'm going to be putting it. Now, if you've never been over to Patreon, it's a place where you can have private conversations, you can interact with me, we can regularly catch up, and I'll be posting most weeks over there. So pop over, sign up, and it'd be great to see you there. Now, as I said, my name is Scot MacArthur, and this is ARTEFACTLive, and I'm really enthusiastic and excited that you're here with me this week, because I'm looking at a topic that I think is absolutely fascinating. But let's just go back a week and look at what we did last week, because it really was a fascinating show. We had Nick Askew on last week, and Nick's take on story was, well, if you've watched it, you'll know that I felt it was how to describe it. It really was impactful. I mean, he basically talks about the power of nothing and how people will give you their story if you give them the space to share their story. And it really was transformational for me. And I've not said that before about any one of the 62 other shows I've ever done. It was fascinating. He was, I said to him offline, he was a bit like Human Valium. You know, he was a bit he was very much, he relaxed you immediately just by the tone of his voice. And the colours that he used in his videos, and indeed he used on my show last week, the black and white, was fascinating. And I found it quite inspiring. Ever since, the show's gone down very well across the platforms. Funny enough, particularly on YouTube. I don't know why, so hello YouTubers. But it went down really well on YouTube, and there's been a lot of folk talking about Nick's work and how it sits with the work that I've been doing in broader sense storytelling. So thanks again, Nick, and I'm really looking forward to getting you back on to the show sometime in the future. So to this week. Well, last week, I was on a course. I try to go on a course every couple of months these days. I think it's important to keep yourself up to date. And I went on a course with this fellow who's going to be on the show today. And his name is Paul Sloane. And it was a great course. And he was looking at the sort of the relationship between our assumptions and story, and how we are creative and how we're innovative. So but I'll let him I'll describe his work on his own. But I thought it was great. And I thought, why don't I reach out and ask Paul if he would come on? And lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, please meet Paul Sloane, my guest this week. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Scott.
How are you today?
I'm fine. Great to be with you.
Thanks very much for joining us. Now, Paul, I reckon you and I'm so interested in what you do. I could talk to you for hours, mate. So this could be difficult to keep to the 45 minutes. I've got a list of questions I'd love to ask you, but I'd rather you were speaking. So I'll try my best not to say too much. But can you give us an idea how you got to where you're at today and what it is that you do today as a professional writer, broadcaster and speaker?
Yes, well, it's a long journey and I can dip in and out of it wherever you want. But I speak and run workshops on lateral thinking and the leadership of innovation, mainly for business audiences, but also for people who are interested in lateral thinking and creativity. And I got into it through the route of lateral thinking puzzles. And I wrote a book of lateral thinking puzzles way back in 1990. Right. And it's been a bestseller. This is the book. It's called Lateral Thinking Puzzles. It's still in print today. Sold nearly around 500,000 copies, been translated into many languages, and they are all strange situations where you have to ask questions and figure it out. It's not a book that you read; it's a game that you play, and it's ideal with kids for a long car journey and things like that. Yeah. And then I started to think, how can I use the same principles that you use in solving the problems in business, in solving business problems? And that's how I developed my workshops. And then I've written a number of books in that area. And one of my most popular business books is this one, The Leader's Guide to Lateral Thinking Skills, published by Kogan Page. Yes. So that's what I do. I go around the world, or I did before COVID. I used to do a lot of workshops in the Middle East and USA and on the continent of Europe and places. And that's what I did. But now I do a few over Zoom and I blog a lot.
Yes. How does then lateral thinking help businesses, Paul? I mean, I know it's an obvious question, but let's start at the beginning. You know, what use is lateral thinking if you're running a company or working in an organization?
Well, the primary use of lateral thinking is to drive innovation. It's to find fresh solutions to pressing problems. And that's a challenge that every business faces. And whatever business you're in, there's somebody out there who wants to take your customers off you. They're trying hard to find a smarter way to deliver the goods or services that you currently deliver to your clients. And they're coming up with crazy new approaches, and so must you if you're going to compete. And as you look around, you see great companies like Kodak or Nokia or RIM, who did BlackBerry. I mean, they're very, very successful, full of technical people, and innovation just came along and killed them. Something came along which was a superior approach, or it's something that consumers ultimately preferred. The main benefit of innovation for your organization, I argue with my clients, is not increased profit. It's not increased market share. It's not higher margin. It is survival. And if you don't innovate, you're not going to survive. And how do you innovate? By finding fresh ideas. And how do you find fresh ideas? You use some lateral thinking techniques. It's as simple as that.
Yes. So the world of, I mean, the Nokia story is a sad one, isn't it? Because I mean, they were very innovative. They were a rubber.
They were very innovative, and they were a client of mine. I did a lot of work with them, and they're still going. Of course, they've transformed, and their story is an interesting story. They started in the 1840s as a wood pulp mill, and they did wood products, and then they did rubber products. They made Wellington boots, and then they made cables, and then they made TV components. They got into electronics, and then they became the leading mobile phone company in the world in the 1990s to early 2000s. But they missed the touch screen, and they missed the graphics user interface and some other things that Apple pulled out of the bag. And of course, they were competing in the Premier League. They were competing with the real big boys, Samsung and Apple, and they lost out. But they've transformed again. They're now a network services company.
Is that right? I didn't actually know that. That's what they're doing, network services. Right, okay. Because I mean, I used to work in the Big Four consulting. Did quite a lot of work with the network services businesses. Did a lot of work with some of the platforms like SAP and Oracle that sat on top of those. Yes. I didn't know that Nokia was that. It just shows you've been out having a real job for 10 years now. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so in terms of, sorry, they're still going. So how did you actually get into innovation though? Because I don't think it's something that's part of an MBA program, is it? Or is it, where is it? You know, how do you become someone who's into innovation? Is it in the marketing space? Or sorry if I'm appearing quite stupid here, but I mean, I don't know the answer to it, so I'm going to ask stupid questions.
Well, it's a very good question, because
Yeah.
Innovation used to be something that you'd hive off to the research and development department. So you'd have
Yeah.
an R&D department that was full of boffins in white coats, and they would come up with new products and with very long lead cycles and enormous investment. And sometimes those worked and sometimes those didn't. But nowadays, innovation is part of everyone's job responsibility, I think. So if you're in production, if you're in accounting, if you're in HR, if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, your job is to find new and better ways to do things. And you've got to do your current job well, and you've got to find new ways to do it. I say give everyone 2 tasks: do your current task and find a better way to do it. The scope for innovation in services and in products and routes to market is just enormous. So it's moved out of the R&D department a long time ago.
Yes.
Many companies have effectively minimized their R&D department by outsourcing a lot of their innovation to open innovation and crowdsourcing.
I've noticed that, and particularly with Deloitte, they've done very well with their green dot innovation program, which I've really been impressed with. But one of the things that I used to be involved, I used to be an HR director, Paul, back in the days when I had a proper job. And I worked at British Gas, and we had an absolutely fantastic suggestion scheme.
I know.
It was incredible. It was wild. And we made millions. We saved and made millions of pounds across the United Kingdom and over in Russia, where we were doing some exploration work. But they seem to have faded. There used to be like, there's an organisation called UCAS, United Kingdom's Association of Suggestion Schemes. They've gone. Is that something you've come across, or any view on, or why is it gone?
Well, there's an organisation called ideasuk.org,
right,
which is an association of organisations that have suggestion schemes.
Is that,
and
right,
they're still very active, as far as I know. I spoke at their annual conference a few years ago, and one of the other speakers was from British Gas.
Oh, right, okay.
And he stood up and he said, we put in this scheme, and he said, and one of the first suggestions we got was somebody suggested we change the setting on all of the printers to print double-sided instead of single-sided. And he said, we did that, and it saved £150,000 in the first year.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow. And the point about the story, I think, is this, that the managing director or the financial would never have thought of that.
No.
But somebody low down in the organization thought, they're wasting all this paper by printing just single side. And they made the suggestion. But they had the gumption to act on it. And I'm a great believer in suggestion schemes if they're properly resourced.
Yes. I mean, I remember having... I went to the annual conference a few times as a an HR representative, because I helped run this scheme. And the companies I remember being really innovative were not the ones you'd normally expect or think. British Rail, as they used to be called, were amazingly innovative. I mean, they had some of their engineers were unbelievably clever and would save the taxpayer at the time, because it was nationalised, I'm showing my age, millions of pounds every year because of the way they would bring up ideas for simple couplings or whatever. And our gas fitters used to be astonishingly innovative. And I don't read as much about it. I mean, I hear a lot of people talking about innovation these days. I'm not sure. I'd like your opinion on this. I'd love your opinion on this. Is it a corporate strategic aim these days? Is it something that, has it become a bigger issue in companies, do you think, in the last 10 years than it was before?
I think it has, but there's still a big problem. And it's something I call the innovation disconnect. So if you speak to the people at the top of the organization and you say, is innovation important? And they'll say, yes, it's strategic for us. And then I say, and do you want your people to be innovative? And they say, yes. I say, do you want them to take more risks and try more things? And they say, yes. Then you meet the people down at the coalface, the workers, the bright people in marketing and production, and you say, are you empowered to try new things? They say, no, we're not. There's so many rules and regulations. You have to get approval from a committee. You have to fill in all of these forms, and it's just not worth the hassle and the trouble. And also, I'm so busy working on my current objectives, I don't have time to try new things.
Right.
So the wish is there at the top, but they're not willing the means. They're not enabling people to be innovative, to be experimental, to try things, and they don't allow failure. If you're going to be really innovative, you have to allow people to try things, many of which will fail. You have to be comfortable with an environment of continual failure. You have to fly slightly out of control. You can't control everything if you want to be in a really innovative company.
So if I was a potential client of yours and I came to you and say I was the chief executive, and I said, look, Paul, I work in let's make one up, artificial intelligence company. Right? I don't know where that came from. It just popped into my head. And I want my business to be more innovative. Obviously, you're going to say, you need to do it properly. But what would you say to her? What would you say? Okay, this is how I would start to develop, grow, nurture, whatever the words you want to use, innovation in your business. How would you do that? How would you recommend she starts to think about?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I've got an answer. And it's an answer I do get asked that question. And the answer I give is this: find out what is impeding innovation today and remove those barriers. So if you carry out a survey and you ask a lot of people lower down the organization and you say, what innovations were implemented in the last 12 months and what things did you try? And ask them a whole bunch of questions about to what extent they are empowered and allowed to try things. You will very quickly find out what's impeding innovation currently. And it might surprise you. There's a blame culture. There's people are risk averse. We can't get support from other departments. There's no time to try things. There's no budget. That you get all of these things which are currently and I say, before you start any major programs with suggestion schemes and idea management schemes and open innovation and design sprints and all the other modern stuff, find out what in your culture and processes are impeding innovation today, and then take a hammer to those. Just remove those obstacles.
Right. Yes. You've reminded me of something that really used to frustrate me. One of the things I used to do when I was in consulting, you'd go into a program, you do the program, and then you'd have that idea from the military, the after action review, where you would look at what happened and what went well, what didn't go so well. And you would create, we used to call it a knowledge bank, where you would say, in this type of client, in this type of program, these are the issues that you should think about at the beginning when you launch your next program at a different client. Absolutely made loads of sense. Not a sod looked at that. They didn't. It's crazy, because it would have saved them millions of pounds, Paul.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got a perspective on it, but to this day, I worked on the Ministry of Defence for a while, and we were saving enough money every week to build a primary school, right? That's how successful that program was. The minute we left, it fell apart again. And yet we documented it all. We'd said, this is what you need to do. This is what you should consider. But they didn't. So there's all these consultants back in there again 20 years later doing the same thing that we did 15 years ago, So have you got a perspective on that? Or is that just...
well, it is what it is. But a lot of businesses get it now, I think. The really dynamic businesses which are leading in terms of innovation really get it. The big fast-moving consumer goods companies, the high-tech companies, they get it, I think.
Right, okay. Got a comment here from Martin. I wonder what you think. He's just reflecting on what you've said over on LinkedIn. I can relate. Being out of control, ! I've found creativity flourishes then.
Yeah, you have to be slightly out of control.
Yeah. You put that in a job description. Every Friday, you must be out of control.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? You can't put it in like that.
Yes. So let's take it to, again, I want to come back to some of the puzzly stuff in a minute, but I'm still very curious from the corporate perspective. Forgive me if I'm banging on about it. But so again, I'm the chief executive and I've taken away the blockages and I've set up a good system. Who do I talk to? In my business or outside my business, how do I create an innovation team, or what do I do? What's the practical?
Well, there's all sorts of steps you can take. But the leading companies, they talk to their customers a lot, and you observe customers and you see what difficulties customers have using your product or using the service. And that's a great source of innovation. Pain is a great source of innovation. Wherever the customer has any kind of pain, that's an opportunity for you to do things better. They speak to their suppliers. They speak to the staff. So the people working in the business have lots of good ideas, and you should harness them. So when I spoke at that conference, the Ideas UK conference, British Gas spoke, but there were also Siemens spoke, Siemens Drives in Congleton in Cheshire.
Uh-huh.
And the guy from their suggestion scheme stood up and he said, last year we implemented 7 suggestions per employee in the business. Our target for next year is to implement 9 suggestions per employee. I nearly fell off my chair.
Yeah.
It was a remarkable metric and very, very, it set the standard, really. It's a gold standard. Yeah. And they have about 400 employees. They make motorized drives. And what they do is they encourage everyone to make suggestions. They're into continuous improvement. Like Toyota get 2,000 suggestions a year in their suggestion scheme from their staff.
Yes.
And that's about, so they've got 300,000 staff. So it's about 6 per employee, but it's still a lot of suggestions. They implement most of them. And so does Siemens.
Wow.
And I spoke at a group of chief executives in Cambridge, and I mentioned this story about Siemens. And one of them said, yes, we know Siemens, we're a supplier to them, and they're a pain because every month we have to put in a report with suggestions of how we can make improvements or suggestions for innovations which would help. And this was in their grounds maintenance. So not only do they ask their staff for suggestions, they ask their suppliers, I'm sure they ask customers for suggestions.
Right.
Another thing they do, Siemens, while I'm on about them, is they sponsor the Halle Orchestra in Manchester. And they get people from the Halle Orchestra, like the conductor, to come down and speak at their management meetings, to give them a different perspective on how you get the best teamwork from a team, things like that. So I was very impressed with that. And quite a few stories just there about one particular company and how successful it is.
There's a couple of comments here I just wanted to reflect on. One from Stephen. Absolutely, Scott. I work with children's safeguarding boards. The learning review process is getting better, but distributing learning to other organisations in different regions is a big problem. Not invented here syndrome. There is something about that causes a problem for the work that Steve's doing. Have you any experience in that sort of, he's talking about the sort of visceral experience of having to learn, every lesson yourself, rather than it being, not from here syndrome, as he's talking about. How do you help that?
Here syndrome is very well known and it's widespread.
Yes.
And the attitude is, we've got the smartest people. We understand our business best. Don't tell us how to do our business because we've been in it for years. We understand. Yes. Your suggestion won't work. All right. And that it's very common and it's about being open-minded and getting people to open their minds. It's a big challenge. Yes. And it's something that if you've got that culture, then it's hard to change, but the CEO can change it.
How?
Well, that's a good question. They have to. Telling stories is a good way to start. Yes. So, what the CEO can do, it's very hard to change the culture of an organization from inside it, from the middle. But the top guy can do it, man or woman. And what they can do is they can tell stories, and they can say they can praise people. For example, say you've got a culture that's risk averse. Yes. You don't stand up and say, I want you to be more adventurous and take more risks. Well, you can't do that. But you say, I want you to tell a story here about Scott. And Scott here tried something. He did this experiment. It didn't work. It failed. But that's exactly the kind of initiative we want to see from now going forward. And people say, just a minute, the CEO's praising Scott for failing.
Right.
And then the CEO goes, let me tell you about a story when I was in marketing. I tried this major initiative and it was a big flop. It cost us £100,000. We fell out, but we learned this lesson and I've learned, and it's taught me this. And they say he's talking about his past failures, not his past successes. He's not boasting about how great he is. He's telling us about how he tried something that didn't work. And gradually you can get the message across.
Yes.
Hewlett-Packard had a thing called the Medal of Defiance, and it was awarded to somebody who'd broken the rules in the company in order to achieve some change that was beneficial for customers, that overcome some problem, that shifted barriers and fixed something. And to do it, they'd broken internal rules. And what they're trying to say is it's okay to break the rules. And we could still, we're a big company, but we can still act like a small company.
Brilliant. That very naturally led me to my next question, because I don't know that I'm a former scientist and I always like to have evidence for things. I don't think there's any evidence that I've seen for this, but do you think it's true that the bigger a company gets, the less innovative it gets?
That's a real risk, yes.
Yeah.
The irony is they've got more resources, more time, but they can't. But the big top companies understand this. And if you look at a company like Procter & Gamble, the CEO, Laughley, said, I want 50% of our innovations to come from outside the business. He set that target. And people thought it was crazy, but they achieved it. And they set up an open innovation program. And open innovation is the exact opposite of not invented here. It says, give us your ideas. And the point about someone like Procter & Gamble or Unilever or Reckitt Benckiser or Johnson & Johnson, they all do this now, is they've got a fantastic route to market. They're in 120 countries or whatever with distribution and everything. And what they want to become is the best channel for new products. But they don't say, give us any idea. If you go onto the Connect and Develop website for Procter & Gamble, they're very specific. They say, we want ideas where you can wash clothing at 40 degrees or 50 degrees temperature and remove oil stains. Or we need a solution for this particular problem with air freshness. We need, and they're quite specific about the problems they're trying to solve. But they want small companies who've got great ideas to come to them in those areas. And they won't exploit, they won't shaft them. They won't do them down because it's not in their interest. They don't want to get a reputation as somebody who's difficult to do business. They want people to come to them ahead of Unilever or Reckitt Benckiser or Johnson & Johnson. And so they want to be easy to work, and they want people to make a lot of money.
Yes.
They want to say, we worked with XYZ company at Huddersfield, and we turned them from a $1 million turnover company to a 50 million turnover company by working with us. And they want those kinds of stories. So they've deliberately had to break down internal barriers because initially companies are very distrustful of people outside. So you have to increase that, and you have to change attitudes, and you have to stop your corporate lawyers from writing contracts that just protect you and do down the other guy, which is what they tend to do. You want a contract which is fair to both sides.
Yeah, I remember that being a big problem with suggestion schemes, that quite often the employee who'd had the idea would be given a 250 quid check and said, thank you very much. And then the company would make millions from their idea. That's never going to encourage anybody to be part of a suggestion scheme, is it?
Well, I disagree, actually. The evidence is that big rewards are actually divisive. I worked for IBM when we used to give a percentage of savings, and then people would say, well, just a minute, I worked on that idea. How come he's got all of that money? And the evidence is that if you give people recognition, what people want above all else is recognition. They want to be listened to. If you put in a suggestion, you don't hear anything for a month, it's demotivational.
Right, yes.
And if you put in a suggestion, and with the Siemens scheme, every suggestion had to be acted on within a week.
Yeah.
It would go to another manager. And if it got initial approval, then the person who made the suggestion got an award. And it was only about £50, but it was tax-free because there's a scheme with the environment, you can have a tax-free. Yes. And then if it went on and saved the company millions, that guy got his picture on the wall and he got lunch with the MD. Right, that's all. He didn't get, but he got recognition.
Right, okay, excellent. Right, okay. I'm not sure I'd have wanted lunch with some of my MDs right now. Very good. No, I love it when it's counterintuitive like that. I think that's brilliant. I love that. Thanks. I've just got there's a wee message here from Martin saying, can I have one of those medals, please?
Yes. Medal of Defiance. It's called the Hewlett Packard Medal of Defiance.
Yeah, I love it. Really insightful, gents. Thank you. Got to dash. Thank you, Martin, for tuning in. That's a pleasure having you with us. This will be on replay on Friday and on Saturday, Martin, if you want to see the rest of the show. Of course, it will be on my YouTube channel pretty soon as well. So, okay, so I like you mentioned stories earlier, and of course, I talk a lot about stories on this show. It's the main focus of the show. And one of the things that when I met you last week, when I was, receiving your knowledge from that training event I was at, it really made me think, because one of the things you challenge is that we've got to be able to understand or realize when we're making assumptions in our thinking. And I was wondering about that, and I don't know if I'm on the right track yet. You might have to coach my thinking a wee bit here, but I was thinking, okay, I tell a good story. That's what I do. And I make assumptions from my own stories. We are story. There's a good argument to say we are story or we are time. But how do you challenge your own thinking in that context? Because I sit here and I've got my artifacts behind me. We'll go into your artifact in a minute. And I tell a story and I'll say, what did you learn from that? But I'm interested in hearing if there's any. Am I too narrow-minded by doing that, or how do I think even better about it? Paul, have you any thoughts on that? I mean, I know it's a slightly convoluted question.
Well, it's a challenge, and we all make assumptions, and we do it all the time. And as you go through life, the more experienced you are, the older you are, the more intelligent you are, the more assumptions you make. You can't get through life without making assumptions, but they are dangerous, and you've got to all the time challenge assumptions. And we assume that Putin is amenable to diplomacy, or we assume that if we apply sanctions, it will change. So you make all sorts of assumptions about the future, and you make all sorts of. When you meet somebody, you make assumptions. You make very quick judgments. And Daniel Kahneman in his book Thinking Fast and Slow says the first time you meet someone, you make all sorts of assumptions, and we're trained to do this from caveman days when you'd see somebody as a threat or an ally, depending on whether they're part of your tribe or another tribe. So we've got all of these things built in to our mental approach, which limit us, and you have to challenge that. And it helps sometimes to have somebody around you who challenges your thinking, and just says, "Is this right?" The old approach of how the king in his court would be able to shoot everybody and fire them and promote them, and he was surrounded by yes men, but he had a court jester, and the court jester's job was to just say some crazy things, and whatever he said, no matter how stupid, he couldn't be fired because he was the jester. And you need sometimes to have a court jester in the room who'll just say, "Just a minute, is that the right way?" So somebody will play devil's advocate. Otherwise, you get groupthink. You get everyone around saying, "Yeah, it's a great idea, boss. I think we should do that." And that is an issue. And
that's really helpful.
One method you can use to combat that is to use de Bono's 6 thinking hats.
Yeah.
And with 6 thinking hats, somebody makes a suggestion, and first of all, you put on the white hat and you look at the data, then you get the red hat with the feelings, and then everyone puts on the yellow hat and they say everything that's good about it. Even if you think it's a terrible idea, you have to say something good about it. And then everyone puts on the black hat, and together everyone has to say the drawbacks, the downsides, what could possibly go wrong, including the CEO whose pet idea it was. He has to say, or she has to say, well, here's something that could go wrong. And everyone is then allowed to say what could go wrong. And because of that, very quickly, you look at the whole thing from every possible perspective, and you'll come to much faster, better decisions using that method.
It's great that a method that's been around so long is still the method, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's still the method, yes.
Yes, it's a fantastic technique. So next up's basically my favourite bit of the show. I'm going to ask Paul now to bring forth his artifact and share the story behind it.
It was my favorite thing in the entire world.
I have to add here, we haven't prepared anything. We haven't pre-briefed or anything. I've not seen your artifacts. So what have you brought for us to have a look at today, Paul?
I've brought a sweatshirt, and it's a sweatshirt. It's got a Guinness logo on it. All right.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And I wear it when I play tennis, and I wear it when I go for walking, and I wear it occasionally. And it's the only article of clothing I've got. The only article of clothing I've got, which my father wore.
Oh.
And he had a problem with white blood cells. He had too many white blood cells, not enough red blood cells. He had low iron, and he was diagnosed by the doctor. And the doctor said, "You've got to drink Guinness." And he drank. He liked Guinness, and he wrote to Guinness, and Guinness sent him this sweatshirt because he was such a good fan of theirs. They sent him this. And he survived a long time, and he died in 1999 at the age of 89, 23 years ago this year, I think. And when I wear it, it just reminds me that I'm still in touch with him, and it's a connection. And, when you're young, when you're little, your father is a hero. Your parents are heroes. And then when you're a teenager, your father and mother are an embarrassment. All right, because they're not cool. They're really, they're so embarrassing. And then when you're in your 20s and 30s, you're very busy, but they're friends, and they help out, and they do a bit of babysitting. And then later on, the parents become a burden, and you have to look after them, and you have to worry about them. You have to put them in a home, and you have to, and they're ill, and so on. And then eventually you lose your parents. And it's only after you lose your parents and you look back later that you realize what a tremendous debt you owe your parents. And all that they did for you. My father, he sacrificed his career to some extent. He moved from, I was born in Scotland, and then he moved down to Blackpool, where I grew up, because his children had a better chance of getting into grammar schools there. And his career as a customs officer did not advance. he would have done better if he'd stayed in Greenock or Liverpool or somewhere else. But because more children got to grammar schools, that's where he chose to go. And all his children went to grammar school, and I went on to Cambridge University and did all those things. But he put in a tremendous effort to help all of his children. And this artifact just keeps me in touch with him.
Well, Paul, I think you've just proven how important artifacts can be. What a lovely thing to share with us. Thank you very, very much. That was very good of you to do that. I think it's astonishing, isn't it, how the memories just flood back when you touch or feel something. One of the things that I have that's dear to me is Old Spice aftershave.
Really?
Yeah, I don't wear it, but my grandfather used to wear it all the time, and he was a merchant navy guy for 40, 50 years. And to this day, every now and again, I have a wee fly sniff because it was him.
Yeah.
You know,
and it smells can bring back very powerful memories. Yes.
Oh, astonishing. So yeah, well, thank you. It really was a lovely, lovely artifact to share with us. So I'd like you to start thinking about what your favourite story is now, because I think you've set the bar pretty high there, Paul. So I'm looking forward to hearing what your favourite story is. So this is the part where I ask people to share their favourite book, personal story, poem, film, whatever. So Paul, what is your favourite story?
Well, I tell a lot of stories about lateral thinking and how to approach problems from fresh directions. And people say, give me an example, Paul.
Yeah.
And I gave a lot of talks, and I gave a talk in Southampton. And afterwards, a guy came up to me and he said, do you know the Granada TV story? I said, no. He said, well, I work there. Let me tell you it. And he shared this story. And it concerns British television. And up until 1953, there was only one TV company in the UK. It was the BBC. And then the government decided to auction licenses for commercial TV stations by region. There were going to be regions around the country, and each region would have a independent commercial TV station. A lot of companies thought this was a great opportunity, a license to print money. You could sell advertising on TV for the first time in England, Scotland, and Wales. Mm-hmm. And they put teams of analysts on to see which regions of the country had the best demographics, the wealthiest consumers who would generate the most advertising revenue. There was a little company in the south of England called Granada Cinemas. They had about 9 or 10 cinemas run by a Jewish businessman called Sidney Bernstein. His parents had fled persecution in Eastern Europe to come to this country as immigrants, and they'd started a cinema chain. And he said to his marketing assistant, he said, I'd like to bid for one of these franchises, one of these areas, he said, but I don't want you to find me the richest area in the country. He said, I want you to find me the wettest region in the UK. And they went away, and the assistant came back. He said, well, we've analysed it. What we found is the area with the most precipitation per head of population is the northwest of England. Manchester, Liverpool, Bolton, Burnley, Bury, all those places. And they bid for it, and they got it. And the reason I tell this story, and they were very successful. Granada Cinemas, Granada TVs is the only one of those companies that actually got there that's still around today. They've been very, very innovative. They did World in Action, Coronation Street, all sorts of very innovative things. There's a lot of other stories I could tell about Sidney Bernstein. But the reason I tell the story is this. When everyone else is looking for the richest, they're looking over here, they're looking at the lateral thinker looks in a completely different direction. What's the wettest? And the reason he wanted the wettest was he reasoned there's no point in getting Brighton or Westminster, if everyone's out walking their dog in the park or they've gone to the restaurant, you want somebody where it's pouring down outside and people stay in to watch TV. So he just used a completely different approach. And that's what lateral thinkers do. If everyone's going in that direction, they deliberately look in this direction. De Bono says you can't look in a fresh direction by staring hard. If I'm staring as hard as I can, I can't see what's happening over here. I have to turn. Yes. As David Bowie said, turn and face the strange. Oh, and that's what I want you to do.
Fantastic. Turn and face the strange. What song was that from?
That's Changes. Changes.
Oh, yeah, of course it is. Oh, it's fantastic. Oh, I love that. Thank you very much. You blew me away with your stories and your artifact, Paul. Fantastic. Really, really good. So, to finish, really, we need to talk about puzzles because I was blown away by your puzzles as well last week when we went through the various ones, and I think the one at the end, you think you called it the Wally test.
Yeah, Wally
test. Oh God, I felt like a Wally. I sat there and I was like, "What? I'm not getting any of these right at all." So what is it about puzzles? Give us a bit about. I mean, obviously games are popular and have been around forever, but what is it about these puzzles that really helps? And maybe give us a couple of good examples if you have a couple that you're particularly fond of.
Did I tell you this one last week?
Yeah.
A man was driving down the road. Did I do that one?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Please tell it. It is a brilliant story.
Well, a man was driving down the road. He passed a sign. It said speed limit 40.
Yeah.
He carried on driving. He passed a sign. It said speed limit 30. He drove on. He passed a sign. It said speed limit 20. He carried on driving. Came to a sign. It said speed limit 10. What did the next sign that he came to say? Now, it's a normal man, normal car, normal road, and he's passed these signs: speed limit 40, speed limit 30, speed limit 20, speed limit 10. That's all the information you've got, and you have to solve the problem. And people will normally say, well, he came to stop or turn around or end of road or no way or school or something else like that.
Yes.
And of course, those are all perfectly reasonable options, but it's not what I'm looking for. And in a lateral thinking puzzle, it's not any solution. There's normally a solution which is satisfying. You should get an aha experience when you hear the answer. And the answer to this one is that after seeing speed limit 40, speed limit 30, speed limit 20, speed limit 10, the next sign that he came to said, welcome to speed limit. If you saw Birmingham 40, Birmingham 30, Birmingham, you made, every listener who was listening to this has made the assumption that a speed limit is miles per hour or kilometers per hour. And that's a perfectly reasonable assumption to make. I'm not criticizing you for making that. But once you think that way, you're trapped. And once you think in a particular mode, it's very hard to shift that thinking. And lateral thinking is about coming up with an entirely different approach. And if there was a little town called Speed Limit, unfortunately, I can't find one. I've looked at it. If there was a town called, then you could see 40, 30 as you approached it. So it's an example of how assumptions limit us. And in business and in many walks of life, assumptions limit us tremendously.
Yes.
And one of the first things you do if you're going to apply lateral thinking in business is to challenge assumptions. And the puzzles train you in that. Mm-hmm. They train you in checking assumptions, and they train you in, once you get stuck on a puzzle, then you have to come at it from a fresh direction. And the whole process is that the person or the group should get stuck. Yes. And then they have to come out, and as they put things together, then they'll see it. So it's a training in challenging assumptions, and it's a training in questioning, really. And those are two key elements of lateral thinking.
I have to say, I really, really like that example because it stumped me completely when you did it. Completely
it stumped me when I heard it too.
Right, well, at least you're honest. And I sat there and I went, God, what the hell's going on here? And by that point in your event, I knew there was an angle because you're teaching us other little puzzles. I thought, what's the angle? What's the angle? And I couldn't bloody see it, and it was, it was. See, when you said it was like, and it is an aha moment, isn't it? You just go.
It should be, if it's a good puzzle, you'll get an aha moment when you get the answer. Yes.
Yeah. So how do you come up with the puzzles? Are you an archaeologist of puzzle writing across the world, or is it your own?
So well, I run a forum called the Lateral Puzzles Forum where people sat and solve these puzzles. And this one was on there. People come up with them. And people see things in their everyday experience that really odd things, and why would this happen? And then you hear the answer, and it's very, very good. So what was the one I heard the other day? Have we got time for this?
Yeah, we're okay.
So there's a place that does snake venom, and they take the venom from snakes and they send it to hospitals where it's used in anti-venom treatment. And they do this in very controlled conditions, and they do it every week on a Thursday or something. Thursday morning, they take the venom from the poisonous snakes.
Yes.
But before they do it, they check the weather forecast. Why do they do that? And that's the puzzle. All right. And this is a real thing. All right. It really happened. So why would they check the weather forecast? And does it affect the snakes, the weather? No. Is it to do with rain? No. Is it to do with temperature? These are good questions. The answer says no. What are they checking for? And you ask a lot of questions, and eventually you find that what they're checking for is wind. And they won't take the venom if it's a very windy day. And you say, why is that? And then you go through, and what's the reason for that? Is it to do with the snake? Is it to do with safety? Yes, it is. And then you find out eventually, after a lot more questions, that this place is remote. It's way out up in the mountain. And if there is an accident, if the person who's taking the venom gets bitten, a helicopter has to fly in to rush him to the hospital. And the helicopter can't land if it's a very windy day. So they don't take the venom from the snakes on a very windy day. And that's the lateral thinking puzzle. And it's a really tough puzzle. And if you do it with your kids in a long car journey, it will take them, 15, 20 minutes, but they'll get it out eventually. If they ask, you have to ask a lot of intelligent questions to get there. And that's the discipline. That's the benefit of lateral thinking puzzles. And here, once again, is the very first book.
I was going to ask you that.
I've written a lot of problems as well.
Well, I mean, that's been a brilliant. That's 45 minutes already, Paul. That's been fantastic. I have to say, I've got that book actually, and I was going through it the other day, and I thought, God, this is full of gems. And actually, I think many years ago I might have nicked something from you, because we used to use, the Washington Memorial story.
Yes. That's a great story.
We used to use that with clients to actually get them to start thinking laterally. So I think I might have got that from you or from one of your contributors.
Yeah, that's another example I use a lot now.
A terrific story. So, Paul, if people want, you've shown a couple of your books. If people want to get in touch with you, to either engage with you or give you some feedback, or I've got your website here, one of your websites here. But is there anybody else that you would point people to for the?
I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn if you search for Paul Sloane. I'm on YouTube a lot, and I'm also on Twitter @Paul Sloane. So I'm the only Paul Sloane, who is @Paul Sloane. I've got 40,000 followers on Twitter. I tweet a lot. But by all means, drop me a link on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to connect.
Fantastic. That's really, really cool. And I must say, I have really enjoyed it. Just there's some thanks here from the chat. Thanks, Paul. Are your kids now brilliant lateral thinkers, he asks.
Yeah, well, my children got fed up with it. My grandchildren love it now. I've got grandchildren; they love it.
I like the supplementary. Do they still come along and long conversations with you?
Not if they can avoid it.
Excellent. What a great way to end. Paul, I must say thank you ever so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Artefact Live. That's been
Thank you very much, Scott. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, how good was that? I mean, I've got a sore face from listening to that. That was top notch. What we'll do as normal, we'll have a think about it, and we'll post some little clips that Paul and I are happy with onto the various social media platforms. As you know, the show is immediately available on YouTube. That'll be at www.youtube.com/Scott MacArthur. What a fantastic show. So what else is happening? Well, next week, I'm doing something for the first time that I should have done a long time ago, and I apologize for not doing it. In the last few weeks, because of an initiative I'm involved in at LinkedIn, there's been quite a lot of people across the water in America, Canada, etc., that have said, we need to catch up with all these shows, Scott. So I've nicked a title from one of my favorite rock bands, and we're going to have every maybe 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5, haven't decided yet. I'm going to have On a Storyteller's Night as my theme. And what I'm going to do there is I'm going to go back right to the beginning of this show and start to tease out some of the key learnings that we got from some of my amazing guests, because 63 weeks ago, it's a long time ago. And rather than going back and watching the whole show, I'm going to start taking nuggets out from a group of 3, a group of 2, whatever. I'll decide when I'm getting through it, how I'm going to do it. But I hope you'll tune in for that next week. But again, I'll just remind you why I do this. There's a real reason why I get so excited about having guests like Paul on, because I do believe that a good story can change the world. I mean, as he said there, some of these organizations, stunning number of suggestions they're taking from their employees every month or so. That can change the company. That can change the world. That can change careers. And I really, really do believe that. But I think in the hopefully post-COVID times that we're living in, the thing that I really, really reflect on a lot, and it comes from the former Children's Laureate, Chris Riddell, or Riddle, as I would call him in Scotland, Paul, there in the background, is that a good story can act as an empathy engine. Thank you very much for tuning into the show this week. I think that was terrific. And I've got a sore face, Paul, from laughing. I look forward to seeing you all next week. And I look forward to joining you on the replay on Friday and on Saturday. My name is Scott MacArthur. That was Artefact Live. Good afternoon.